This is episode 16 of Chris Sweeney Talks To. Today I'm joined by author and investigative journalist David de Jong. How are you, David?
I'm very well, Chris. Thank you for having me.
No problem at all. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I was dying to talk about your book, Nazi Billionaires, The Dark History of Germany's Wealthiest Dynasties. And it seems to be a lot of this information maybe been out there, but it's been hiding in plain sight, and you've brought it all together and researched it and brought more out.
That's the way I view it as well. Yeah, thanks for picking up on that, on that kind of general view. Yeah.
Why did you go? I mean, maybe before we get into specifics, why this topic? What was it about what was it about this that spoke to you?
I was working as a reporter for Bloomberg News in New York on a team that covered hidden wealth and billionaire fortunes and family-owned companies. And I was hired in late 2011 to be a reporter covering North America, so covering like the Koch brothers, for instance, and Koch Industries and the Waltons, who control Walmart and big real estate fortunes. But I was soon asked after a few months to cover the German-speaking countries because I'm Dutch. I'm a native Dutchman. And, I quickly started reporting, doing these stories that mix the historical and the financial, and finding out, and reporting on all these dark histories of Germany's, best known brands and wealthiest families. And what I quickly found was the blatant whitewashing that companies like BMW and Porsche and the families that control them were doing, through which they, celebrate the business successes of their patriarchs, but leave out their war crimes. Celebrate their business successes through global foundations, through media prizes, through corporate headquarters, through academic chairs, but leave out their war crimes in their biographies or anywhere basically. So again, as you mentioned in your introduction, they're hiding the stories in plain sight.
Yeah, because I think we know so many German brands, and if we take BMW, I think everyone knows BMW, and it's a quality brand. It's a nice car. If you've got a BMW, you've done pretty well in life. It's something to aspire to. But when I saw some, yeah. Well, when I saw some information you had on, it was Gunther Quandt, who was the guy who started off. It's almost horrifying some of the stuff he was involved in. Could you maybe give us I know you don't want to, we don't want to obviously give away the whole book, but a flavour of it, because he was involved in some pretty distasteful stuff.
Sure. Gunther Quandt was the patriarch of the Quandt family, of which two heirs today, two of his grandchildren today, Stefan Quandt and Susanne Klatte, are the controlling shareholders of BMW. And Gunther Quandt, was an industrialist, was a textile magnate initially from the provinces outside of Berlin. And in the 1920s, in the hyperinflation era, he got in control of a weapons manufacturer and a massive global battery company called AFA, which today is called Varta, which produces the batteries for the AirPods that we all use.
We're both doing it, yeah.
Exactly. Both of us, yeah. And after Hitler seized power in 1933, Gunther Quandt became one of Nazi Germany's largest weapons producers. He became one of the largest exploiters of forced and slave labor during World War II, and he, acquired many companies, that were stolen from Jews, or that Jewish people were coerced to sell, were forced to sell because either they had to flee or they had to flee Nazi Germany because of the persecution, or because because they were basically being extorted to sell their companies, and also expropriated companies in Nazi occupied territories during the war. So it's really these three factors that you see not only with the Quandt family, but with the other five families I write about in my book. That's the way how they profited from or benefited from the from the Nazi regime.
And, so Gunther Quantz, so his ex-wife, am I right in saying, married Joseph Goebbels, and Hitler was the best man at that wedding. So
that is correct.
So that kind of further sort of, entwined him in that scene,
Certainly, but Günther Quandt and Joseph Goebbels really did not like each other. There was a massive, and actually Günther Quandt later after the war used that to excuse himself, to say, well, I was a victim of persecution of the regime, and I resisted, I was apolitical. That's what they all said. And Günther Quandt, of course, had this crazy backstory where his first wife dies during the Spanish flu in 1918. And he's 37, and he has two sons from that first marriage. One who also ends up dying. The other one, Herbert, ends up saving BMW from bankruptcy after the war. Now, Günther Quandt then, in the spring of 1919, he goes on a train trip from Berlin to central Germany, and he meets a young girl, called Magda Friedlander on that train trip. And he becomes enamored with her, and after 3 dates, asks her to marry him, and she obliges. And mind you, there's a 20-year age difference between she's 17, he's 37, and that marriage is a very unhappy one. They get one son, Harold Quandt, and when the marriage is dissolved in 1929. Magda gets a royal alimony and is very bored and doesn't know what to do with her life. And then she starts dedicating her life to the Nazi party, and soon falls in love with Joseph Goebbels. And of course, which becomes perhaps the most infamous marriage of the Third Reich, not only because they become arguably the most powerful couple in the Third Reich, but the most radical one, the most radical Nazi one at that. But also because, of course, Magda Goebbels ends up murdering her 6 children in the Führer bunker, and then commits murder-suicide with her husband Joseph Goebbels on May 1st, 1945.
Yeah, these links are almost. When you lay it out, it's very logical, and you put the pieces together. But it's someone putting those pieces together that I just think I find it really surprising. Are you getting a lot of reaction? People are just surprised that all of these things connect. We know about a lot of these acts, but there's a kind of narrative and a connection.
You're absolutely right. A lot of people don't know. Really, they don't know about. People think they know the story, but they don't really know the story. So yeah, I get a lot of surprising responses. Yeah, for sure.
And also, we talked about BMW there, but Porsche's involved, or Porsche. Ferdinand Porsche. He's another one of these characters that was part of this and was able then to have an empire which is still around today. And again, Porsche's one of these brands which is very, very desirable as well, isn't it?
Sure. Sure. Of the 5-6 families I write about in my book, the Porsche Pierre family is the only example of really a family that laid the foundation for its today's wealth during the Third Reich. The other families I write about were already extremely wealthy before Hitler seized power. But Ferdinand Porsche, of course, Hitler tasked him with, or he designed the Volkswagen, or he had a plan for the Volkswagen. Hitler then wanted to build a Volkswagen, tasked Ferdinand Porsche with doing that. Ferdinand Porsche then subsequently convinced Hitler to put his Volkswagen into production. Of course, very few Volkswagens were eventually produced during the Third Reich. There was one of the largest factories in Germany, or Hitler had one of the largest factories in Germany built. Of course, when the war broke out, what was supposed to be Europe's largest car factory to produce a Volkswagen, was quickly retooled to become one of Europe's largest weapons factories. And where, Ferdinand Porsche and his son-in-law Anton Pierre, who had co-founded the Porsche car design firm together with their Jewish co-founder Adolf Rosenberger, who they pushed out of the company, started leading the Volkswagen factory complex, where tens of thousands of forced and slave laborers were used, where they have satellite concentration camps on the factory grounds. And became the supposedly apolitical Ferdinand Porsche became also one of the worst perpetrators of or a terrible perpetrator in the service of Nazi Germany. And mind you, his son Ferry Porsche, who was the one who ended up designing the first Porsche sports car, was a voluntary SS officer, voluntarily applied to the SS in 1938, voluntarily entered the SS in 1941. After the war, designed the first Porsche sports car, but surrounded himself during the 1950s and 60s, when he was CEO of Porsche, with many former high-ranking SS officers, and spewed virulent anti-Semitic vitriol about Adolf Rosenberger, the co-founder of the Porsche car design firm, 9 years after his death, in Ferry Porsche's first autobiography called We at Porsche, where he says Rosenberger tried to extort them after the war, but that was emblematic of other Jewish families who came back to Nazi Germany, or came back to Germany after the war, and claimed payment a second time, according to Ferry Porsche. And this is something very few people know about Ferry Porsche, and that's another reason why I wrote this book, because again, it was BMW which today maintains a foundation in the name of Herbert Quandt, Günter Quandt's oldest son, who was together with his father, a massive co-conspirator during the war, who designed, built, and dismantled a sub-concentration camp in Nazi-occupied Poland, who had the responsibility over Berlin battery factories where thousands of forced and slave laborers were used, who acquired companies in France stolen from Jews, who at his own private estate used forced laborers and prisoners of war. And today, you have the BMW Foundation Herbert Quandt, in Herbert Quandt's name, which has the motto "Inspire Responsible Leadership." Because Herbert Quandt saved BMW from 1959, and that, I think, and then leaving out all of his war crimes, and that, I think, is a perversion of history, and it's completely obscene. Furthermore, you have the Herbert Quandt Media Prize, which Stefan Quandt, Germany's richest heir and BMW's controlling shareholder, awards every year on his father's birthday in June. You have 4 of Germany's most prominent journalists sit on the board of that media prize, and they have a whitewashed biography of Herbert Quandt up on the website, where they don't mention any of his war crimes. And today you have Stefan Quandt and his sister Susanne Klatte, again, Germany's wealthiest families, the controlling shareholders of BMW, working from the Günter Quandt house, which has been their headquarters for 60 years, even following all the revelations about their father and grandfather. They pretend like nothing has happened, and I think, that's the reason I wrote the book. And similar with Ferry Porsche, where you have academic chairs in Germany being funded in the name of Ferry Porsche. The Porsche family have never said anything about the war crimes committed, or the responsibility for war crimes committed by Ferdinand Porsche as director of the Volkswagen factory complex, or about their father Ferry Porsche, who of course was voluntarily applied to the SS, and spewed virulent anti-Semitic vitriol about Porsche's co-founder. And today you have the Ferry Porsche Foundation, which puts out statements like, if you don't know where you're going, or if you don't know where you come from, you don't know where you're going, and the family has never spoken anything about it. And those really kind of dead whitewashing is really the reason why I ended up writing the book.
Not sure. I mean, the thing I found also quite surprising is that, it was also Albert Reichmann, and, his sort of company, and, I think they've got like brand names like, Krispy Kreme, the donut company, and Pret a Manger, the coffee shop, and Dr. Pepper, the soft drink. So, I mean, it does go a lot across a lot of brands that even people that maybe are not wealthy enough to buy an expensive German car, they may be interacting with these brands unbeknownst to themselves, because it's quite a wide thing, isn't it? I mean, they're over very many industries and very many brands.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, it's not only the car industry, but it's very broad. And and furthermore, the Rymans I actually use as a quite a positive counterexample in my book at the end, because Albert Ryman and senior and junior, they were convinced Nazis. They served for the Nazi Party in their municipal council. They were really convinced anti-Semites, and really really, yeah, again, Nazi ideologues. But Albert Ryman Jr., ended up having an affair with a woman after the war, who he fathered 3 children with, who was from Jewish descent. So her father was murdered in the Holocaust. As a Jewish man who was deported and murdered. So the Ryman story is totally bizarre, where you have both the role of perpetrator and victim. Where the current shareholders, which is Germany's second wealthiest family, behind the Quants and after the Porsche Pierre clan, who descend from both Nazi ideologues and a Jewish grandfather. So a Nazi grandfather, Jewish grandfather, Nazi father, Jewish grandfather, mother with Jewish roots. So they actually did something positive and ended up renaming their foundation after Alfred Landecker, which was the name of their Jewish grandfather, but still being transparent about the conviction, the ideological convictions and crimes that their father and grandfather had during the Nazi era. And I think that's the way one should go about it. It's historical transparency is how one learns from these things.
Sure. And in terms of, sort of maybe speaking to the BMW, the Mercedes, the Porsche people, the companies, what sort of response did you get when you presented your book and your ideas? And I'm sure you wanted to talk to them. Was it, would they want to talk to you, or was it just the usual? Sure. Was it just the usual whitewashing, the biographies on the website? Have a look at that.
Yeah, I mean, they gave out a statement, which was, BMW. Well, you have to separate it, right? Because you have family offices that represent the shareholders I write about, and then you have the companies themselves, which, of course, families like the Quant control. So I had to go to both. The family office spokesman of these, many of them just said no comment or declined an interview request, etc. BMW gave me this really terrible statement how they only looked at Herbert Quant's, and also in poorly written English. You would think for a global company they would have somebody on staff who could write like a draft normal statement in English, but they couldn't. In poor English they wrote about how they only looked at Herbert Quant's actions from between 1959, when he saved BMW from bankruptcy, till 1982, when he died. And whereas the family office spokesman for the BMW Quants said this thing about when they replaced the whitewashed biography on the Herbert Quant Media Prize, that they decided for a holistic view of Herbert Quant's life. So it's completely contradictory, and they're trying to duck and dodge, which is the same with Porsche, for example, where the Porsche spokesman and I engage in this 10-month back and forth about the very Porsche and his legacy. And Porsche particularly was very intent on protecting the Porsche myth and brand at all costs. Also because, later this year, they have this massive IPO coming up, which Porsche is going to be spun off from Volkswagen. And it's going to be a huge IPO. It's going to, deliver billions to the Porsche Pierre family.
Yeah. One thing I have noticed, obviously the book's selling really well, but one thing interesting was I saw in Germany, it was the #1 bestseller, and it was doing really well. Has that surprised you? Because obviously, you're obviously showing up a lot of things about these well-known German institutions that people don't. Has it surprised you, the reaction over there particularly?
No, totally, Chris. Listen, in the end, I'm super happy that the book is selling extremely well in the United States and the United Kingdom. But of course, this is a topic which has global themes, but in the end, it's about German companies, then it's about German families, right? So the reaction in Germany was obviously the way it landed in Germany was, to me, was most important. And to see it entering, number one on the side bestseller list is amazing. It's an incredible vindication for a project I worked on for 4 years and had in my mind for 8 years. That's fantastic.
No, I mean, it's a fantastic piece of work. I mean, and I think people maybe don't appreciate nowadays, sort of doing that type of work. I mean, journalism, any type of reporting now, maybe the days of people being able to spend time and getting paid for it, it's less and less. So it must have been a difficult piece of work for yourself to take on. It's more challenging now than it would have been maybe 20, 30 years to work in the media and do this type of work, to make it happen,
That's a good point. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I found it to be it was challenging, but it's also been incredibly rewarding. I mean, I moved from New York to Berlin in late 2017, and I spent 4.5 years in Berlin researching and writing the book From Berlin, in and from Berlin. And, it's been, you're right. People don't get that dedicate this much time again to projects. But I feel, very lucky that I was able to do that.
Yeah. And has it surprised you, the lack of contrition, the lack of, we feel bad about what happened? I mean, obviously I can only imagine, but you just feel as though, as a normal human being, you'd say, look, what can we do to try and make this right, or help, or speak out about it, or try to not repair the damage, but try to offer apologies? Has it surprised you that doesn't seem to be the vibe?
Yes, at one hand, it does surprise me still. But at the other hand, I feel that these families are so cut off. The richer you get, the more cut off you are from reality. You see that also with the Sackler family, which, of course, in Empire, in Patrick Redden Keefe's Empire.
Yeah, the opioids.
The opioids, exactly. These people, they're surrounded by yes men and women, and they seem to be cut off from reality. And I think the role of these handlers is also to shield them from reality, and they don't get confronted with what's actually going on, like in real life.
Have you sent the final book to them? Do you expect them to read it?
No, I mean, if they want to read the book, they had a chance to respond to my questions. If they want to read the book, they can buy it just like everybody else. Sure.
My final thing to ask you, David, was, with these brands and these things out there, consumers now, what would you think? Do you think they should boycott these things? Do you stop buying them? Do you think someone sitting in their Porsche should think twice about sitting in it? Or, what do you think?
I'm a journalist, I'm not an activist. I think people should read my book and then make up their own minds what they should do vis-a-vis these brands and these companies and these families. However, I think what we as consumers can expect at a bare minimum from companies like BMW and Porsche is, at a bare minimum, is that they are transparent. If they want to continue naming, global foundations, media prizes, corporate headquarters, university chairs after their patriarchs or their saviors, that the bare minimum we could expect as consumers is that these people are transparent about the history of not only celebrating their business successes or showing their business successes, but also transparent about their war crimes, because one only learns from history by showing the good and the bad. If you only show the good, then it's just a whitewash.
Yeah. And, since you've sort of disturbed the hornet's nest, shall we say, let's use that phrase, do you think they're going to start to try to maybe push things out of the public eye, maybe trying, if there's any loose ends they can, because I guess there's evidence and information that you've found, but is there stuff out there you think that they could sweep up and get rid of and try to make the situation a little bit better for themselves? I'm just wondering if that might be a retroactive action they may take. Hoping your book sort of passes by, but anyone else looking, maybe can't come across it.
I certainly think that they will hope it just goes over, it blows over, and they can just continue. I think I don't think they would make a move to either like whitewash further, because all these facts are out there now, right? That would be an incredibly dumb move, and people are watching. But I think more they'll just don't change anything. My fear, I expect them not to. I guess one can expect the worst and hope for the best. But expecting the worst is just nothing changes, and they just ignore it.
Sure. Well, thank you for joining me today, David. And I would say tell anyone to go out, get the book, Nazi Billionaires. I mean, it's a fantastic piece of work. And also the fact is that if people like you not doing that work, the world, we wouldn't learn a lot of things. It's important to support this type of work because it's not easy. Like you say, 4 years of hard graft. And I think people should, not only is it interesting, it's shedding a light on something we should all know about. So I'd encourage everybody to go out and get it. And it's been great talking to you, David. I really
likewise, Chris. Thank you for having me. It was really a pleasure. Great pleasure.